Welcome to the Liquid Bookstore.
Ba-bum.
The Adventures of Adelita and Bo. Credits. The Adventures of Adelita and Bo.
The Adventures of Adelita and Bo.
Elise, Harlan, Michael. Harlan, Elise, Harlan, Michael, Harlan, Elise, Harlan, Michael, Harlan, Elise.
Okay, well,
It's Elise's turn to tell a story.
sure.
I'd like to tell you a story that happened a long time ago. It's a story about a girl named Adelita and her bear friend, Bo. Well, on this particular night, they had spent the night in Baja, California. They had slept long and well, and it was just beginning to be dawn. There was the barest hint of light, and there were birds beginning to sing. The sun began to rise. Oh, it was beautiful. There was just a little crescent of light above the mountain, and the rays of the sun shone all pink and purple and golden on the fluffy clouds. Adelita looked at the ocean, and the Pacific Ocean stretched out wide and smooth and sparkling before her very eyes. She couldn't wait. She jumped up and marched right to the water and stuck her toes in the surf. But Bo watched because he didn't much like salt water. She waded in further, and she could see her toes, and between her toes swam rainbow-colored fish. Little fish. But soon there came a bigger fish. A smiling dolphin swam right up to her and began singing a happy song, inviting Adelita for a ride through the waves. She jumped right on that dolphin's back, and off they went through the waves. She could see wonderful things, beautiful butterfly fish and regal angelfish and blue-spotted jewelfish and plants, a forest of seaweed. Oh, it was wonderful. The dolphin then returned her to the shore where Bo waits, pouting. He's hungry and lonely. So together they decide to hop on a stagecoach heading for Idaho. Bo loves potatoes. Soon as they jump off the stagecoach, Adelita digs for those potatoes, and she finds huge ones, big as 4 fists together. She sticks them in the hot coals and roasts them good, and soon they have a whole mess of potatoes. Are they good? But Bo's still a little out of sorts, and Adelita had seen bees buzzing around an old tree stump. Now, where there's bees, there's honey. Adelita crept up to the tree stump, scooped out a honeycomb, took it and gave it to Bo. Oh, was he surprised. He loves honey. He stuffed it in his mouth so fast that the honey dribbled down the side of his mouth, and an angry bee spied Bo eating the honey. He stung him on his nose. Oh, cries Bo. Now he's nursing his nose. Adelita hears the train whistle. Ooh, ooh, ooh. It's the train headed east, far east, to Vermont. They jump on that train. Maple syrup is known to be a good bear cure for bee stings. When they get to Vermont, they head to the first maple tree to get sap to put on Bo's nose. Right away, it feels better. They begin to look around to see what they can see in Vermont. It's fall in Vermont, and all the leaves are turning beautiful colors, reds and orange and yellows and purples. They rake up piles of leaves and jump into them. Crunch, scrunch, crackle. The leaves went as they played and made dust angels in the piles of beautiful fall leaves. What a way to end the day. What a wonderful adventure they had had. And I stepped on the nail bent, and that's the way the story went.
Harlan. Now it's Harlan's chance to spin a yarn.
Long ago, when the frontier was mighty big, there lived a girl named Adelita. Adelita was mighty big, too. Why, she was as tall as a tree, and strong as an ox. Folks say that she could carry her pet bear Bo for 10 miles without getting tired. Those two sure had some fantastical adventures. One time, they were wandering in a swamp in Florida when an enormous alligator called out, "Adelita, folks say that you're as strong as an ox. Well, what I want to know is, are you as strong as an alligator?" "That's a good question," said Adelita. "I'm not sure. What say we wrestle?" "I'd love to," said that alligator. And he reared up out of the swamp, and he and Adelita grabbed hold of each other and began to wrestle. The problem was, they were both so strong that neither one could throw the other. They stood there locked in combat for 5 hours before giving up and calling it a tie. Now, I don't know if you have ever wrestled an alligator in a swamp, but if you have, you know how stinky you smell afterwards. Bo got one whiff, and says, "Adelita, I think it'd be a good idea if we went off to Michigan so you could take a bath." Adelita sniffed herself and, she agreed. Now, the two of them had just about got to a nice, cool lake when, boom, Adelita slipped and fell on a muddy patch of ground. The more she tried to get up, the more she slipped. And the more that muddy patch of ground grew, Bo couldn't help himself. His mouth began to twitch. He began to chuckle and to chortle. Well, finally, he ended up laughing so hard that he himself went boom and landed right next to Adelita. Adelita got a big grin on her face, and she says, "Looks like we're both going to take a bath. A mud bath, that is." And she began smearing that brown muck all over her arms and squishing it between her toes. She and Bo took turns daubing the brown mud all over each other till they looked like two giant walking mud puddles. Couldn't see nothing but their bright eyes shining out of all that dull, wet earth. Afterwards, they dove into the lake and swam around until they'd washed the mud off. But by then, they were exhausted. They went to a field in Tennessee and picked all the cotton that was there till that field was bare. Adelita sewed up some sheets into an enormous mattress cover, and grabbing big wadfuls of that cushy cotton, she stuffed it inside, and then she and Bo lay back. That mattress was as soft as a sheep's back, and soon Adelita and Bo were sleeping peacefully. Excuse me, telling that tale just plumb tuckered me out. I think I'm gonna go take a nap myself. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.
Michael. Here comes Michael with a mighty tall tale.
Greetings, boys and girls. I'm going to tell you a story about a girl named Adelita. Now, Adelita was a big girl. I'm talking real big, bigger than big. I mean, Adelita was the size of most mountains. She was so big that when she went to wash her feet, she had to go to a lake. And when she plopped those big feet into the lake, it took up the whole lake. I mean, her little toe was bigger than your school building. She was big. Now, Adelita liked to travel around North America having adventures and having fun. And she had a travel companion, her friend and pet, Bo. Now, Bo wasn't a little kitty cat. Bo wasn't a little doggy. Bo was a bear, and a big bear at that. He was almost as big as Adelita. Well, one day, they were sitting around thinking, well, what are we gonna do today? What kind of adventures are we gonna have? And then Adelita said, hey, let's take our sled and go on up to Canada and we can go sledding. And Bo said, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So they took their sled and started loading it up. Now what they loaded it up with was trail mix, so they could nibble and munch along the way. You know, all kinds of grains and seeds and things. And they started heading on up to Canada. And when Adelita took steps, they were big steps. Boom, boom, boom. A few of those steps, and they were almost up into Canada. Well, along the way, Adelita saw a really tall tree, and she looked and said, hey, that'll make a great walking stick. So she reached over and pulled it up out of the ground, and she used it for a walking stick. Now, when they got up to Canada, they started playing in the snow. They started having snowball fights, throwing these humongous snowballs at each other. Then they decided it was time to start sledding. So Adelita put Bo on the sled, and then she got behind and gave a vroom, powerful push, and they started flying through that snow. All of a sudden, they hit a patch of ice. The sled turned over sideways. Boom! It started going through the dirt. Started digging up all the dirt. Knocking over the trees. They started sliding somewhere around what's now called North Dakota. And they didn't stop until they got to what's now called Kansas. Well, when the dust settled and they dusted themselves off, they turned around and looked, and all that earth had been dug up, and they had spilled all of their trail mix. That trail mix later sprouted, and that's why in the Great Plains you have these fields of wheat and fields of corn that sprouted up from that trail mix that Adelita and Bo spilled. Well, they laughed and they joked and they had a great time, and Adelita said, you know, I'm thirsty. The thing that Adelita loved more than anything else was apple juice. Now she knew that there was this place up in the left-hand corner of the United States, what's now called Washington, where they had these really great apples, the best apples on the whole earth. So they started heading up there. Boom, boom, boom. And a few steps like that, and there they were. Well, Adelita reached down, scooped up a whole mess of apples, and she started squishing them together and making apple juice. And she and Bo started drinking it. Oh, it was so good. And they started drinking it as they were walking around. And they took the crushed up apples and they just sort of threw them here and threw them there. And now, up in Washington, they have apples all over the state because Adelita and Bo spread those apple seeds everywhere. Well, after they drank all their apple juice, they decided they wanted to go and relax. So they went to what's now called Oregon. And there was this big mountain there. It's called Mount Hood. Well, they leaned back against that mountain, and Adelita had a cup with her, and she was thinking she wanted some hot cocoa. But where to heat it up? Now, Adelita was a smart girl, and she knew that down in the core of the earth, there was this hot substance called lava. So she decided she'd use that to warm up her hot cocoa. So she popped the top on that mountain and then used that walking stick and dug down in to where that lava came up. And she took her cup, plopped it down in there, let it heat on up. And then she and Bo sat back, drank hot cocoa, thought about the adventures they'd had, and thought about the adventures they were going to have later on. And that's the story of Adelita and Bo. And that's the end of that.
Well then,
Michael.
that was a bit shorter than I thought it would be. What is this? I guess this goes... That's where we are, right?
The Adventures of Adelita
Yeah,
and Bo.
okay. This just goes back to that. I'd wanna go in here. And then I'd wanna go to probably the bookcase here.
Do you really want to quit?
Yeah.
Credit.
Why do the credits have such good music? That's a real good question. Like, a lot of these things, the credits have the best music. Like, dun 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 dun, yeah. Paul Fullwood, huh? That's a name. Do, 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 do. Alright guys, that's Liquid Books 4, The Adventures of Adelita and Bo for the PlayStation.